Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing our series today called Words of Life, and based on the book by Nijay Gupta, 15 Words of Life. Last time I think I said there's 25.
There's 25.
But the book has only 15, and
right.
we are kind of working through those and just discussing what some of these words mean. Sometimes I think we hear words so often, particularly in the church context, that they become sort of meaningless, or we think we know what they mean, but we don't always know what they mean.
Yeah, or another word, I think even when we get into this word, but a few words have been like this, where we've limited the words.
Or reduced.
Kind of really narrowed it down to this, and it's quite often a little bit bigger, and there's a lot more nuance to things.
Okay, so today's word of life is peace. So what do we think of when we say the word peace?
Well, I think we think of things like a conflict ending, end of war, lacking conflict, that sort of things that, end that, and there's some sort of resolution so that the conflict doesn't go any further. Yeah,
so examples of that today, we're literally praying today for the end of a war between Russia and Ukraine, and we're praying for that war to end peacefully and without annihilation or domination, and like you said, lack of conflict. So that could be a resolution between an argument or a feud between two people, and hopefully, we get to the point where at least there's no further harm, either emotional or physical, happening, or possibly even a relationship restored. And then I think the one that comes to my mind too is we have peace as sort of this general sense of calm. Life can be really hectic. We wish for a peaceful time where we can get sort of a break from being busy, and we're wishing for less stress and maybe tranquility.
Which is a good thing.
Yep. And if we look at the teachings of Jesus said to his disciples on the night of his last dinner with them before he was crucified, he said, this is John 14:27, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give, so do not be troubled or afraid. So when Jesus is referring to peace here, and other authors of the New and actually the Old Testament, they're not talking about just lack of conflict or lack of war or even a sense of calm. What are they talking about?
Really, it just I think you're looking at this things like something more, bigger, better.
So from an external, if I'm looking out on the outside to the inside of what Jesus is talking, it might look the same as what I expect peace to be, but I like how Nijay Gupta in the book defines it. He defines it as wholeness, goodness, and harmony in Jesus. And a word that we've been talking about a lot lately is the word flourishing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to describe what peace is. The Jews also have a word that captured this kind of bigger idea, and it's often translated as peace from the Bible, and it's the word shalom. And to understand that, we have to go right back to the beginning, the Garden of Eden. So God creates this beautiful world, and he recognizes it as good. And he creates humanity in their image. And so we have God and humanity together in this world. They lived in harmony, and they flourished. Humans flourished in that environment. They lived in peace. They were whole, they were good, and they lived in harmony with God. God visited them all the time. So this is the starting point of God's story with humanity, and I think to me it speaks of God's intention. He wanted to live in peace and harmony with humans, and he wanted to see us flourish. Now we can contrast that with other cultures like the Babylonian Enuma Elish or the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, where the creation of humans is born out of war and chaos. So it was usually a war between God or God factions, and humans were created either as slaves to the gods or as soldiers for the gods to help them in the war. So there's the sort of theme for other creation myths or stories is the idea of chaos, which if we go back to the Garden of Eden is very different.
Yeah, and actually I've heard of lots of the chaos and violence.
And violence,
which seems to be like not peace.
Yeah, the opposite, yeah.
I know we maybe even get into a little bit of how violence is not peace when we kind of understand how sometimes we've used peace.
Yeah.
Especially through history and conflicts.
Yeah, we're going to actually talk about that a little bit in a little bit when we finally get to the Roman Empire. But let's go back to the Garden of Eden for just a minute. We actually don't know how long humans lived in this state of flourishing peace. But by chapter 2 in the Bible, we see that humans are rebelling against God. And as Nijay describes it in the book, there's lies, suspicion, and accusations. They begin undoing God's work of weaving creation together. So this is the second part of God's story that we call the fall. And that comes after the opening act of creation. So there's this long period where we see the effects of the fall on humanity. And then we see the story of the Jews and God making a covenant with the Jews, and they're supposed to be an example of what peace might look like by having a covenant with God, which obviously, if you read that part of the Bible, the Jews didn't really keep up their end of the bargain. And then we come to the time of Jesus, and here's what we mentioned before. At that time, Israel and most of the known world at the time was occupied by the Romans. They were in control. And they actually had on the back of their coins a little symbol and the letters PAX, which meant Roman peace. Now, this peace came from conquest. There was no war for a time because the Romans had defeated all their enemies and enslaved people who opposed them, and they implemented a stringent tax system. So their peace came at a cost.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's almost like, we're to say that, hey, we're experiencing peace right now is more that we'll say that government is experiencing peace, but the people in it are not experiencing it all. It's sort of like, hey, if I'm experiencing it, then you are definitely experiencing it. As opposed to, well, that may not be
the case. And then anybody who challenged the peace, they were punished severely. And that's how Jesus came to be executed, is that he was accused of being an insurrectionist. And that's something Rome could not take lightly. So Jesus was executed along with other insurrectionists. And as you mentioned, the occupied peoples of the Roman Empire, they didn't fear being attacked by outsiders. They feared Rome.
Yeah, that's right.
So, as you said, is that really peace?
Is that really peace?
Yeah. So let's look at peace from a follower of Jesus' perspective. And in the book, Nijay Gupta refers to the book of Hebrews. Now, the writer of Hebrews makes a strong case for Jesus bringing peace through his death and resurrection. So he absorbs the punishment for sin by dying and then coming back to life, demonstrating his power over death. And Nijay points out that Jesus is also the mediator that restores our relationship between humans and God. A verse that he quotes there is from Hebrews 2:11. So now Jesus and the ones he makes holy have the same Father. That is why Jesus is not ashamed to call them his brothers and sisters. So now all humans can be included in God's family and have a restored relationship with him. So right at this point, I'd like to dig a little deeper into that Jesus mediator idea. So this is the same role that the priests at the temple at the time of King Solomon had up to the exile before the Jewish people went into exile into Babylon. So Jesus acts as a high priest for this new covenant, which is essentially the role of a peacemaker and a peacekeeper.
Right.
So Jesus made peace through his sacrifice of his own life. So again, this is different from like pagan sacrifices that were usually made to appease an angry God. In this case, Jesus is overcoming the real enemy of the story, who is referred to as the devil or Satan, and it's not a hostile God or a ruined, sinful humanity.
Right.
So in our human rebellion, we were subject to sin and death, and Jesus' sacrifice frees us from that. And I think that's a significant part of the Christian narrative that we don't always focus on.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And so with that, there's this ability that to be in a relationship with God again. And Jesus keeps that peace by helping us to know him better.
Yeah. So that's the big idea for me, is that Jesus makes peace by sacrificing, but then he keeps peace by allowing us to know God better. And Jesus himself said is to know me, is to know God the Father. So I really like the idea that's been kind of woven through a lot of these words that we've been talking about, is that by the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives, they're transformed through this relationship with God so that we can once again flourish. And that's have peace, knowing that our relationship with God is restored. Now, we've touched on this a few times, and I'd like to just touch on it again, because I think we get this idea that once we have the peace of God, that everything's just going to be okay.
Right,
And flourishing does not mean that we never experience trouble, hardship, suffering, or persecution.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we really look into the word flourishing, it is about it's not, again, it gives the idea of not only whatever, we'll say in this case conflict, even though conflict had, but it is gone. There's something that's laid a foundation that can be built upon. And, in this case, it's very much we can be transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit, leading into this wholeness and a promise of full restoration. That will happen here, but full restoration that will happen in that someday. And I think when it comes to the idea of flourishing, this idea of and the peace that really is talking here, I think I've been kind of thinking about this, and maybe it's a little bit simplistic, but kind of like if you have two people in a relationship somehow, let's say a couple, not doing well, a lot of conflict, they go to a therapist. And that therapist just merely helps them mitigate that conflict. So the conflict ends. They walk away from that experience, and maybe that conflict has ended, but there's nothing built to stop another conflict coming again. Except when you go into therapy, you hopefully you find a therapist that not only helps you mitigate that conflict, but then sows into you tools and things to build a foundation so that a relationship can flourish, because conflict will come up again. But then you all of a sudden have these tools you've built up so that when that conflict does happen again, your relationship actually starts to build, and you know how to work with it together and become something stronger and better that wasn't there. And even in the absence of conflict, something better and stronger is there. And I think if we see flourishing as it's not the rest, just the absence of whatever, it's actually there's something been put in for something to be truly healthily built.
I really like that. So Nijay suggests in the book that Jesus was made complete by what he suffered, and he says that perhaps this means that he could identify more directly with human suffering because of that. And so he goes on to say that having the peace of God does not mean life is easy. Rather, there can be joy and blessing in the midst of our weakness and rejection. So Jesus is our leader. We're followers. That's why I like to call ourselves followers of Jesus. Jesus modeled the way for us, so we follow him and his way. So to me, I always am a kind of a questioning person, and I kind of ask myself, so what is his way? And there, Nijay, again, I really like how in the book he describes it as peace waging. And I don't know, it took me, when I first read that, I was like, what is that? Because we always kind of use the word waging with the idea of war, because it's easy to understand what waging war is, but what does it mean to wage peace?
Yeah, and I think that's an ongoing question, but I think the idea of waging peace, because it's action.
Yeah.
That means that in order to, and it's not just, I think sometimes we talk a lot about being peacekeepers, which is good. Yeah. But there's also that peacemakers, which then is, I'm actively looking at how I can sow peace into a situation,
bring pieces,
and stuff like that. And
I like that. So I think that starts with an internal transformation. So we ourselves need to flourish. So we become followers of Jesus. And when we flourish, when we stay connected to him. And Jesus explained it in the book of John, like it was, this is his sort of last discourse and teaching with his disciples before he was crucified. He said it was like a vine and branches. So just like the branches get life from the vine, followers of Jesus find life and peace when we are connected to him. And I thought, interestingly enough, that peace itself is not the end goal in and of itself. Peace is a gift and a resource for followers of Jesus to protect their hearts and soul as we participate with Jesus in his mission to bring the gift of the gospel to the world. And I thought that was it's kind of eye-opening, because I think lots of times we see peace as the end game.
Right.
And for followers of Jesus, peace is, like you said, it's that the thing that equips us to bring Jesus or participate with Jesus in his mission to bring the gospel.
Yeah,
to
it's
the world.
a lot of foundation and tools and building, because it's not just about stop that.
Yeah,
it's okay. So I'm stopping that, and what do we allows for something to be built, a healthy structure.
Yeah, and Jesus in his most famous message called the Sermon on the Mount, told his followers that having this peace did not preclude us from suffering or persecution, like we just talked about. But he said the peace he offers will help us endure it. And I think there's where it comes, the idea of it. It's not the complete idea, but the idea that it is a tool that we have as followers of Jesus to help us endure anything that's a hardship or a suffering or persecution.
Well, there's also where kind of stuff that we've talked about a little bit here, but definitely we've been talking about as a staff, and we're slowly bringing it to the church is the fact that, and I think this is very much a peace flourishing type idea where we talk about focusing in on joy and the joy of a mindset and all that, because in how joy, as we grow in our character and maturity, it's the ability to return to joy from the six main emotions that can be registered on our brain. They can light it up. And in as much as that we have, kind of persecution and stuff like that, all of that is eliciting, many things like that. Elicits one of those six, if not multiple, of those emotions. And no matter what we do in life, we're going to experience one of those six emotions, things like anger and sadness and despair. Where peace comes in is not an absence of those emotions, but an ability to return to joy as when we do experience those, and they don't completely derail us, but they can actually, there's something healthy happens as a result of the experiences that we're going through.
Yeah, and I really love when we're looking at this particular training, and it's based on neuroscience, but it lines up with, it completely lines up and explains a lot of the stuff that we're taught as tools and things from the sort of the perspective of Jesus and his teachings. When they line up like that, and we give a rational explanation of, that's the way our brain works, I think that is just it really speaks to me that this is the way God intended it to work.
Right.
So good. And then in his explanation of waging peace, Nijay presents two aspects of peace that he describes as the troubled prophet and the tranquil priest. So in troubling times, and if we look at the news today and in recent times, I believe we are living in troubled times.
For sure we are.
We see Christians kind of do one of two things. They either get angry and they fight for things they believe in, and we'll call that the troubled prophet. Or they say, chill out, relax, and pray. God is in control. Don't worry about it. And we'll say that's the tranquil priest. And we sort of see those two opposites happening in the news. And obviously the one that gets the most press would be the troubled prophet, because that's the one that is going to get people worked up. And I love how Nijay presents the idea of who's right and can they both be right? And then he goes on to suggest that we do need to be both.
Yeah.
So we need to flourish in troubled times. So that helps us feel secure in knowing God is with us and that we will endure. Again, that's that internal transformation we talked about earlier. And as you said, it's that ability to experience strong emotions or strong negative emotions and then return to joy. That's the piece we're talking about. And then we demonstrate that to others that are around us. And that actually brings peace to them. So there's the idea of the tranquil priest, is that we need to be flourishing and experience the peace and bring it to others. But then he says we need to have we have the responsibility to roll up our sleeves and do something to solve the problem that is causing the trouble. And I thought, okay, that's something that me personally, I prefer the tranquil priest, although there is a significant part of my personality that has sort of an activist bent. I do want to see the world become a better place. I just don't like the way many groups and even Christian groups go about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part where Nijay goes on to talk about, and he goes on at length here, so it's quite a long read in the book. But if I was just to sum it up, the first step is to love one another.
Yeah.
Love is God's primary character. So it starts with being loving. And the second is that we need to take action. So there's the action part you talked about from the get-go, is that peace is not just something that happens to us. It's something we give away. And we need to bring peace to situations. And we do that by doing good.
Yeah.
And again, this is echoed in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. From Matthew 5, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." So just like a lamp is on a lampstand that brings light to situations, it is not our marching or picketing or voting that's going to make a difference. It's our good deeds.
Yeah. Well, it just seems also, as I think through the idea of this tranquil priest or troubled prophet, as you said, like you lean towards one.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I think I lean towards the same one. There are some people that I know and know about that would probably lean to the troubled prophet.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is to realize is that there's a time and a place for both.
For both, yeah.
And the biggest thing we need to do, especially as a community, is one is to know when we need to be either one, but also when to lean into, to know who leans into what, and to like, hey, maybe right now lean into me, who's going to more there, and then as a community we lean into someone else in the community that's maybe a bit better at the lean into that and finding the right moment to do both. Because the truth is, there are sometimes when the inaction has done a lot of damage, and there's sometimes when the action has done a lot of damage
too, yeah.
But
and that comes down to discernment.
Yeah, and so much we need that to be true peacemakers, is to know that yes, both are going to be needed. We just really got to be better at knowing when.
When, yeah, exactly. Good
right
point.
One is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really like having these conversations, and we like being able to do this. And so please like and subscribe in the video. If there is something in the conversation that has just, give you some thoughts, give you some questions, maybe even give you a perspective that we didn't kind of share, we'd love to hear that. So feel free to make some comments. We will make sure we look at those and engage. If you want to have further conversations, whether, find a friend that they can have some good conversations with and talk a little bit more with this word peace. Read the chapter, kind of see some stuff that maybe we kind of didn't really cover in this conversation. If you're part of our church, please do take some time in your missional community to maybe talk a little bit about peace and the challenges, especially in the idea of the troubled prophet and tranquil priest, and when to do either one of those. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.